In this video, we'll take a look at how to generate and file a compliance report. Government reports will be found in the Compliance menu under Government Reports. Along the left-hand side, you'll find a list of all the reports that can be run. And if you're looking for a particular state report, that will be listed under the state here. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a list of previously run reports. And if they've actually been filed, they'll be marked with a green file. You can also find your state reports in here as well. If you use the Open button, this will open this particular report criteria. The Download button will download a PDF of the report. And then there are a few additional options here if you needed to edit this particular filing or delete the report altogether from the previous report. There are 3 basic steps for each of the reports. First, you'll enter the criteria for the report you're trying to run. Then you'll generate the report. And then you'll actually file the report. The criteria pages may look a little different on each of the different types because they're looking for different information. But in general, those are the 3 steps for each of the reports. If your database has multiple filing committees set up for it, you'll want to make sure that you're choosing the appropriate committee. And then you'll want to make sure that you're choosing the appropriate bank accounts that go along with that committee. In this section here, you'll see a list of previously run reports again, where you can actually load the criteria from that report, or you can start a blank form. This data integrity check is actually something that we put together to look through the system to look for the most common type of compliance errors. So things like missing occupations and employers, addresses, and those kind of things. This is not an official FEC validation check. That's going to come later in the process. This is a step that we've implemented so that you can check the report before you actually go through the process of generating the report. What you'll do is actually just enter the start and end dates for the period, the threshold date and amount, and then use the button that says Run Check. If you prefer to skip this step, you can do that by using the Skip to FEC button or the Generate Report button. When we run this check, what you'll see is a list of all the potential errors that may exist within the system. If we click on any one of these, we'll see, looks like Jane Smith is missing the occupation and employer. So we can actually update this . And you'll see this actually updates in real time, showing that they're both now fixed. And if we rerun the check, that line disappears. Once these things have all been corrected, you can actually go ahead and use the Generate Report button, and that will take us to the initial criteria screen. You want to make sure you're choosing the proper schedule for this report, the current election period, your election state, the date of the election. In this case, I'm going to actually just run July 1st to September 30th. This itemization threshold section here, typically you won't have to change anything in here until after the election passes, because the only thing you may need to change at that point would be the start date for the next itemization threshold. The cash on hand at the beginning of the period will be something that's going to need to be manually entered by yourself. You can find that on your prior report. The ending cash on hand from that report will be the beginning cash on hand of this report, or you can actually run a report within the system from the standard reports looking for the cash on hand on a particular date. This checkbox here will suppress the name titles, so Mr., Mrs., Dr., those kind of things. This checkbox here will auto-generate line 11A. If you prefer, you can manually enter the prior reports, 11A and 11AII. Typically, auto-generate's going to work out fine. For your sorting options, the natural order is going to actually put memo items directly following their parent transactions. You can also sort them by name. or by receipt date. If this were to be an amendment, you would check the amendment box. And this amended schedule ID is going to be the FEC-ID number of the prior report that's being amended. So this would be FEC-123456. And then your amendment number will be the number of how many times this has been amended. So this is your first amendment, you'll enter a 1. If it's your second amendment, you'll enter a 2, and so on. In the Report Options tab up here, there are some additional fields here. If this were to be an amendment, you could enter some report text explaining the reason why this is being amended. And then there's some other options on the side here. Once the information is filled in, or the criteria is filled in, you can use the Generate Report button. And then after a minute or so, we'll get a generated page. Once the report has been generated, this is the screen that will appear. If you would like to name your reports as you're pulling them, you can certainly do that. It may get a little confusing if you're just looking at these things by time frame. So you may put something like Draft 1 or Draft 2 or Final Edition, and then use the Rename Report button. This top link is going to give you a PDF of the report itself. This second link is the actual official validation file that does come from the FEC. And then what you'll see in this section here is the errors and warnings that have been returned from the FEC, a summary of the totals, and then at the bottom of the page you'll find the actual errors that need to be corrected. So in this case, being a sample database, we don't have FEC ID numbers, we don't have treasurers connected to committees and those types of things. These error items at the top here, these will actually prevent your filing from being successful at all, whereas the warnings at the bottom will still allow you to file the report, but it may actually generate an RFAI from the FEC. This third link here you probably won't use most of the time, but it is kind of good to know what it is. This is actually the electronic file that gets uploaded to the FEC website itself. And if there's any time that we ever need to make a manual edit to your file for some reason, we may ask you to send us this file because that's what we're actually going to be editing. This is a text file that should open on any computer. Looks like a bunch of gobbledygook, but our compliance team knows what they're looking for in there. Once you're ready to actually file the report, you'll enter your committee ID, so your C number, your filing password. This is not your campaign manager password. This is your FEC filing password. You can enter an email address and a fax number if you'd like to receive confirmation from the FEC whether it was successful or rejected. The connection type is always going to stay TCP/IP. This amendment field will be left blank. And then if you want to save this information, your committee ID and password, you could use this checkbox here. Once you've entered the information, you can use the blue Upload FEC File button, and then in a few minutes you'll receive a confirmation email, assuming you entered your email address here, letting you know that the filing was successful. If at any time you need to start over from the beginning, you can use this orange Reset button, and then that will take you back to starting the form. Once the filing is complete, this Filed button will appear on whichever report was filed. Clicking on it will show you the details of when the filing was done. This will be the FEC-123456 number that was assigned to the report once it was filed.